Today we're going to talk about mastering data modeling for Power BI and Fabric. So this is less of a demo session and more of a conversation. So please feel free to chuck your questions in as we move through. We might not stop on every question. We might keep the flow of the presentation going, but if there is a chance to answer, we will. So I'll start off with a little bit of an introduction. My name's Kelly Broekstra. I'm an MVP and I work in Melbourne, Australia. For a small consultancy company. I've been doing data warehousing, Power BI, business intelligence for 15 odd years now. And my passion lies in building models that work really, really well for what you're trying to achieve and for your business. So that's actually what we're here to talk about now. Warwick.
Thanks, Kelly. So hi everyone. My name is Warwick Rudd. I'm the principal consultant and founder of SQL Masters Consulting, like Kelly, based here in Australia, but Kelly's in Melbourne. I'm up in Brisbane. The most important parts, David has put the link in the chat for you, but feel free to scan our QR codes and you'll be able to, that'll take you straight to our LinkedIn profiles that you can hook up with, or I shouldn't say hook up, you can link with us to ask us any questions about this session or any session or any topic on the data platform. So what are we here to talk about?
It's a good session when there's already, my phone's already buzzing with people asking to connect to me. So
excellent.
All righty. So this is a little bit of an agenda for our presentation today. Like I said, it's more talking than demos, but basically we're going to talk you through the process of going to the business, finding some business requirements for a report and turning that into a scalable, user-friendly, easy to consume data model. So the steps that we take to do that particular process is we start with some research, we identify the business processes, we determine the grain of the data, we look for dimensions, we look for facts, and then we draw the model. So we're going to take you through a real life scenario going through that process as part of this session. So we'll kick it off with a little bit of an introduction. Warwick's going to play the role of the business user or the CEO or the GM or something like that from the business who has a requirement for some reports. And I'm going to play the role of the business intelligence consultant or the developer, pick your terms. So I'm going to ask him a lot of questions about what he wants in the report to demonstrate to you this process. But this is the process. This is the skeleton that we're kind of aiming towards. So Warwick, do you want to start off with a little bit of what's your company? What do you do? What are you looking for?
Sure. So as Kelly mentioned, we want to take you on a little bit of a journey throughout the session today. For those of you who have joined us after we started, if you've got access to the chat, feel free to put those into the chat and we'll try and answer those as we go. But like Kelly said, I'm playing the part of a CEO of a consultancy company. Now, we did this a couple of weeks ago over in Vegas. So we're staying with our company based in the US. And I'm playing the role of the CEO. And we provide a wide range of services to our clients, both from a consultancy services. Plus, we also upsell hardware devices, including e-readers, to allow us to provide a greater benefit to our clients. Now, with that, we cover nearly all of the US. And as such, I've got dedicated sales departments that work really, really hard on qualifying leads to convert those leads to opportunities and hopefully into final contracts. So I've got this pipeline that we need to work through, but it's really hard for me to track how we're progressing overall across all of the regions that we happen to be in. So I'm looking for an easy way to be able to see, have I got regions which are outperforming others? Have we got products which are doing better than others? Do we need to pivot on things? Do I need to bring in more staff? Do I need to bring in more sales staff to be able to cope with that domain? Do I need to be able to bring in more staff to actually do the work from a consultancy point of view? Well, at this point in time, I don't know how I'm going. So I'm needing to make those decisions. So what have we done? I've called out to Kelly and said, hey, we need some help. And so I want to know, how are we able to get that information so that I can make the appropriate business decisions to make my business grow and to service our customers a whole lot better. So, Kelly, are you able to help me out on this journey to get these better insights as to how we operate and how we can improve what we do for our clients?
Absolutely, I can help. That's what I'm here for. And I do like the fact that you have an understanding of what you're looking for. So we'll dive into that in a bit more detail, but thanks for the overview of your business and a little bit of an understanding. So at this particular point, in the process, I would step away from the conversation if I have the opportunity to, and I would just do a little bit of research sort of off onto the side. So first thing I do, the Guide to Warehouse Toolkit book, which I actually have proper copy of, but I also have an electronic copy of, because you never know when you're going to need it overseas. Um, Most people have heard about this book. It defines the Kimball approach to data warehousing. It is an absolute must-have when it comes to this sort of thing. And what I like most about this particular book is it actually goes through chapter by chapter a whole heap of business processes and how they can be modeled. It uses that as its training tool. So in there are chapters that cover things like retail, inventory, finance, healthcare, customer relationship management. So the first thing I do in this particular example is Warwick is talking about a consultancy with a pipeline, a sales pipeline, potentially some customers. So I would read up on the customer relationship management section of that book and also possibly sales. The retail sales section is more about a physical retail store. But there may be some lessons that I want to learn from that. But I definitely read up on the CRM stuff, the customer relationship management, just so that I've got an idea. It does a lot of the work for us. So don't reinvent the wheel. Go in and have a look at what's actually in there. The second thing I do, Microsoft actually released a couple of years ago what it calls the Common Data Model schema. Now, it brought this out for Dynamics more than anything else, but it extends beyond that. And Dynamics is a CRM. So in this particular example, it definitely could be of value. And this is a GitHub repository that has objects or the JSON for object structures to provide a template to provide conformity and industry best practice standards around these particular things. So it's Microsoft Learn articles about the common data model that could go in and have a look at. I'd look again at CRM in this particular account, maybe some of the opportunity part of sales. It sounds like Warwick kind of really does that kind of pipeline thing. Going in understanding what I already have available to me can save me some work down the line. So I like to do the research up front, whilst I have that sort of in between initial, hey, can you build me this and details conversation. I'll go and see what's already done, and then I don't have to do all the work. So these are the things that I leverage first off as part of my research. But at the completion of that research, I'll go back, I'll have a meeting scheduled with the CEO, with Warwick. And Warwick, the first question I'm obviously going to ask you, oops, that's my bad, is what do you want?
So I want everything, like I said at the start, right? So we've got a business that covers quite a range of areas, quite a range of services, products, etc. And I want to know how that all fits in, so I can make decisions on what do I need to do. So can we start there?
Can I have $1 billion?
Okay, can we redefine?
Okay. So everyone will always ask for everything. It's kind of the pitfalls of being a consultant or being a developer is everyone always wants everything straight away. So I put on my agile hat and I go, you can't have everything all at once. If you do, it'll cost you $1 billion and it'll take 3 years to develop. So let's start with a minimum viable product or start with a prototype or a proof of concept. Let's start small and build up from there. So what is your number one priority item that you're wanting to look at?
Okay, given that you've outlined that to me, and market pocket is important. I guess we should start at the business side first. And so if I'm more able to easily understand how I can track sales, and then tracking those sales, are we trending in the right direction? Am I easily able to pivot or make some slight changes? And so, given we're going to look at the sales side of things, is there something off the shelf that from a reports that could make this easy?
There absolutely most definitely could be something off the shelf. It depends on what systems that you're using and what you have available to us. However, just be aware that off the shelf does come with some limitations. It specifies that you do things the way that the software explicitly needs you to do it. And sometimes you may have put in some complex business rules or processes away from the system that the reports won't necessarily be able to achieve. So we can have a look at that, but let's focus more on building something a little bit more bespoke, because it sounds like you've got quite a unique situation in that you're using this system as a consultancy sales process. Bit different, so let's stay away from that. But by all means, we can always go back down that path and see how we go. So what we
So
have here is sort of my standard answers for what I respond to when I'm asked these kinds of questions. The one thing I'll just go back to with priority is make sure that the business sets a single priority one. You're not asking for priorities, you're asking for a priority. What is the absolute first most important thing? If you try and work on too many things at once, you're going to fall into the trap of not being able to deliver anything. So you were going to say, look,
I was. So if I'm understanding you correctly with these off-the-shelf reports, that if we don't match what it's wanting to do, then we're going to have to do some modifications to a off-the-shelf report, which is going to take a lot of effort and also maybe restrict us in doing upgrades.
yes. And they're also going to require, they might not restrict you, but they'll require a lot more maintenance when you do upgrades. Do you have anyone in your business who's understanding of the business rules, but also tech savvy who can help you ensure that you don't misinterpret the data?
Or I've got some people who are very business savvy and they've got a little bit of knowledge from that tech side of things. I guess, like myself, enough to get myself into trouble, maybe not do the right thing.
Yeah. So let's stick with building something bespoke for now.
Okay.
Off-the-shelf reports often need a full-time employee just to maintain them.
Okay.
Awesome. Oh, alrighty. So you want a reporting solution for your sales team. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. So given that we're going to focus on that reporting side for the sales team, the pipeline going to be a really, really big thing for me. Are we able to start there?
Yeah, so that's great. So this is when I delve into some more detailed questions. So can you actually describe so the pipeline process is the process that you want to report on. Can you actually describe that business process to me and how it works in your organization?
Okay, sure. So, we've got a company website like everybody does. On that, we've got our inquiries page that you can contact us and put an inquiry on that website, or you can make a phone call and our sales team will look after you. So anything that comes in there, we've got our pre-sales team. They work on those initial inquiries and validate them, right, to work out, well, are you a tire kicker? Are you actually wanting some more work? Which area is that going into? Is it our consultancy side of things? Is it our upsell of our hardware side of things, so that we're able to put that to the appropriate sales team and then track that in those various pipelines, because we've got multiple, to work out getting us from each of those stages to that eventual sale.
Awesome. That seems quite quite a robust solution that we're trying to solve. So it sounds like there's quite a lot of opportunities. Do you use a CRM to track all this information?
At the moment, we've got you know, something in place, like,
Yep.
but I'm not going to say what, because you might not
And
like it. But it is a little bit clunky for our salespeople to be able to take that information and pass it up the tree to me to be able to see, well, how are we actually going? And this is why I've reached out to say, hey, how can we improve this?
oh, that sounds perfect. Awesome. Alrighty. So is there anything, any activities or any parts of what you just described that are of particular interest to you? You spoke about breaking the sales pipeline down um, into phases. Is there anything else that you want to sort of highlight now that we don't forget?
Yeah, I really want to dive into the multiple territories that we cover across the country. Okay, because each of those territories, they cover both of the consultancy side of things as well as the hardware sales. So I need to know, of those territories, which ones do we need to grow or spend more time or change our products or services or anything like that, so that I can make those decisions.
Now, when you say territory, they regional geographical territories?
Yeah, so um, uh, if you think about it, right? So while the country is basically broken into three parts: west, central, and east, we've done the same thing, broken those territories into those similar sort of areas, so that we're able to track the demographics on how our customers are using our services and products.
Um, And this is probably the most important question that I never forget. What are you actually trying to understand more of, track, or change as a result of putting these reports in place?
So given what we're focusing on, I really want to know about our sales resources. Okay,
Mhm.
so have I got enough in the various regions? Are they appropriate for the particular industries that our clients reside in? Are they focusing more on the consultancy side of things, or are they more on the hardware sales side of things, as to which way I need to put more resources to help grow our business?
Sounds like you've got some really good outcomes that you're hoping to achieve. Just a side note here, if your reports don't have strong outcomes, and like I said, an outcome is something that you're trying to track, or more specifically, trying to change. Your reports are going to get looked at 5 or 6 times and then forgotten. People aren't going to start using those reports if they don't help them in any way, and they need to help them with something significant. So I often ask, what are you trying to change? What are you trying to track? Sometimes if I'm talking to a big enough executive, I'll try and line up the reports with any KPIs or OTRs or business processes that they need to be tracking, because realistically, those reports are going to have a much bigger bang for buck if they help with one of those bottom lines or one of those KPIs within the business. So I'm really trying to understand that so I don't miss the meaning of the report and the purpose of the report. And therefore, I can ensure that the reports and the data models that we build are really great, really helpful to Warwick. So he doesn't just look at them 5 or 6 times and go, oh, that's pretty, and then forget all about them. So that bit, although, doesn't feel particularly natural to ask, it is the most critical question in this part in the process. So don't overlook that particular question. All righty. Is there anything else you want to add?
So given that we've spent a lot of time talking about the sales side of things, etc., but I'm sure that there's things that I haven't thought of. So is there a way that we can incorporate, or maybe you've got some knowledge on maybe answering some things that I haven't thought of and include those. I know that's a big ask because, I should know my business, but hey, I'm trying to work out and be a little bit future proof.
Right. Good thing I did some research at the start to understand what sort of things are normally asked of out of a CRM or a sales process. This is where that research can really come in handy. So traditional data warehousing, you build for everything. Agile data warehousing, you build a minimal viable product or just what you need at this particular time. And unfortunately, just what you need at this particular time can often not be helpful when it comes to this particular problem, which is how do I ask more and more questions? Because we all know as soon as someone looks at a report, they get an answer to what they initially asked, they have another question, and then they'll have another question. So this is where determining the grain of the report or the data model, is incredibly important. Now, for those that don't know, the grain is the lowest level of detail that we can go down to. So a really good sales example, you go to the supermarket, you buy a whole heap of products. Is the grain of those products a sale, i.e. you get one receipt? It has a sales date, it has a receipt number, it has a total amount, it has a tax amount, it has basically that is the grain of the sale. However, we all know that's never going to answer all our questions because we want to know how many cartons of milk you brought, how much bread you brought, how much fruit you brought, all of the items that were actually within your cart. So the grain you actually want to go to there is more the sales line. So each of the lines on that particular receipt. So what we're trying to do is solve to the lowest level without overcomplicating things. So the tip here, it's always more challenging to go lower after you've started your build process. It's easy to aggregate up, and a lot of the data warehousing toolkit, the Kimball methodology, does sort of speak to this a little bit more because 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when storage was a lot more expensive, compute power was a lot harder to get, you often had to make a compromise on the lowest level of grain because you just couldn't store every single line item on your receipt. It would just blow out your system way too much. So you might have had to have considered just doing just storing your data in your data warehouse at the receipt level. Fortunately, though, with products like Fabric and Power BI and analysis services, that's really no longer an issue. Compute and storage is fractions of the price it was when those books were written. So whenever possible, go to the lowest level of detail. But again, don't over-engineer it. So in this particular example, Warwick is looking for a CRM system. So we're going to be looking at things like an opportunity or a sale that's in the pipeline, which in CRM speak is often referred to as an opportunity. Now, on that opportunity, there will be things like the products that the customer is looking to purchase, who the customer is. We're speaking before about regions, what region or territory that customer or that particular sale is going to occur in. What are the processes or what is the stages within that pipeline? So a question I'm going to pose to Warwick now is actually more on the customer side of things. So there can be two levels of customer. There can be an organization, and then there can be the individual contacts within that organization. So Warwick, do you care about the individual people within each of the organization, or do you just want to know that this particular sale refers to this particular company?
I'm only interested in that it's to this particular company.
Awesome. And then the second question that I'm going to ask is you obviously care about the sale itself and the phases in the pipeline that it goes through. Do you need to track an email was sent on this date, a phone call was made on this particular time, or do you just care about the sale itself, the opportunity itself?
I think I only need to worry about the opportunity. I don't think I need to know that, hey, my sales staff have sent multiple emails in trying to get that. I think that's far too granular for what I'm needing.
Awesome. So these are the kinds of questions that I'd ask to determine the grains. So he doesn't need accounts and contacts. He just needs accounts or organizations. He also doesn't need interactions within that opportunity. He just needs the opportunity. Now, that's not to say we can't add the lower grades later on. And in this particular example, those lower grade items are quite separate. So it's not going to be too difficult to add them later on as part of the data model if there is a need for them. But I wanted to highlight here that you don't need to over-engineer and over-develop your data model to achieve what you're trying to get. So again, go back to the what are we trying to achieve? What's the purpose? What's the action? What are we trying to change or track? We don't need to know that smaller level of detail. It's going to help us a lot in building this data model and these reports a lot quicker. Cool. Is there anything else, Warwick, that you've thought of that we haven't spoken about yet?
Yeah. So sorry about my sketching skills. Hopefully this. Are we going to focus? Not going to focus. It's not going to. It's not going to focus. There we go.
There we go.
There we go. So sorry about my sketching skills, but we were looking at putting together, something rough as to what I'm sort of looking for to be able to give you some ideas as to what we're looking. And as you can see here, so I did some Googling and drew up this rough sketch for you, and I know it's got a lot of details on, but just let me go through that. And so we've spoken about our regions, and that's where I put the little map down the bottom to break those up. But I want to be able to drill in and go, here's the particular region. I want to see everything across the entire company, but I want to go down and go, right, how are we going in this particular region? I also want to be able to say, in that region, what is that industry? Or it could be for all regions, I want to choose a particular region, particular industry, as well as being able to say, this time frame, right? Because I'm really interested in the financial year side of things, and go by quarter, looking at how are we for the last quarter by quarter? Is there a change? I want to be able to look at the revenue by stage in how we're going through those. We've looked at the revenue by state because we've spoken about that for our regions. And then we're looking at, so, I want some figures to show me what is that revenue and how's that broken down, as well as I want to be able to see what's that forecast percentage on what we're doing across the board as a business on all of our products, all of our services, everywhere that we provide out to our customers.
That's great. I'm glad you thought about this. Quite a lot
is that a good
start?
No,
that's a really great start. And what you'll often find is that I have been handed a report design on a napkin once. That was a fun experience. But quite often the person requesting the report will have a bit of an idea. It may be an existing report they want to replicate, or parts of an existing report they want to replicate. It could be an Excel pivot table. They're like, we built this in Excel. Can you make it like refresh and do funky things in Power BI? There's lots of different ways that you can be presented with this is what I want to see in my report. So this is what we're going to sort of look at and use as a basis now. So this part in the process is when we start to think about what are our dimensions and what are our facts going to be. So for those on the call that may not be as across some of this terminology as everyone as some others, I'm just going to briefly go through what a star schema is. I'm sorry if you already know it. I will try and go through it reasonably quickly. But the star schema is the model that we use for dimensional modeling. So for data warehousing and Power BI, it's different to a third normal form or an operational system data model, because we're focusing on being able to get the data out of the system quickly for reporting and less about trying to get the data into the system. We're also aggregating a whole lot more. So it's a very different structure. The basic summation of what the structure is we have a fact in the middle, which is the business process. It's the what are we actually reporting on? What has happened in the business? It needs to be some sort of event, whether it's a sale, whether it's a pipeline, or the opportunities within a pipeline. That's the process that we're trying to model. In the old school world, it was a measure group in analysis services multidimensional. It's the things that we measure, the things that we count or we aggregate, we sum, we average, we find the max of. The dimensions are the points on the outside of the star. If you think of a star picture or like an explosion. It's kind of cool. The bits on the side are what describe the fact. So they need to be connected to facts. And they are the things you often find in filters or in groupings. They could be things like products, dates, people. They're less of the things that we might count the number of them, but we don't count the average number of phone numbers or something weird like that. So that's what the dimensions are. So the best way to sort of describe this is to go back to the report. Just quickly, was there a question, Warwick? Did you want to pose that question, or do you want me to keep going?
So the question is, so we don't need to answer this because we're going to cover it very shortly. But so, how do you handle the definitions? You're talking about definitions. You're talking about opportunities, but Pete wants to report on revenues. This is a common misconception when it comes to sales personnel versus financial reporting. So given that, we'll, I've said, yep, great question, hang tight. So if we will, I think we cover it, but keep it in the back of your mind, and we'll come back for that one.
Awesome. Right, so we're back onto our lovely little scribbled mock-up report with the pretty colours and all that sort of stuff. Now, I tend to start with the dimensions. I know that the process here is sales through a pipeline or opportunities. So I'm going to concentrate first on the dimensions that we need to build out. So I tend to get a highlighter, whether I do this on an online tool or a physical actual piece of paper. It depends on your situation, but I try and stick to sort of, highlighting across the page and things like that. So the first thing I'm going to do is look for anything on this report that could be a candidate for a dimension. So the first thing, dimensions are generally your filters. So quite easily at the start, I'm going to highlight the three things that Warwick put down the side as his drop downs or as his filters. He wants to filter by region, by industry, and by date. So they are going to be dimensions or attributes within a dimension. The other one that's that we're grouping is so to find the dimensions, you look for the things you filter on and you look for the things that you group by. So the things that we're grouping by are our accessories. Now I'm guessing, Warwick, you drew this from a sample because you talk more about consultancy services and you had a couple of hardware products that you sell, but you don't sell water bottles. You kind of just scribbled that. That's fine. Awesome. Either way, you have the concept of a product, whether it's a physical piece of hardware or whether it's a service that you offer, it's a product or service. And this is actually a really good opportunity to clarify business terms. So, Warwick, what do you call them? Do you call them a service? Do you call them a product? Do you call them products and services? What term do you use to describe the things that you want in this particular list?
We use both products and services because they are two separate parts of our business that I really want to be able to see. The services are definitely those consultancy services side of things, and products being these are the products that we are wanting to upsell.
Okay, so products and services. All right, well, we'll put them all in one table. We might just shorten it to product just for now, but we can change it. If you can get that business terminology right at this part in the process and make the tables as you move down from here have the names that the business understands, it's a lot easier. If you have to change names later Or if you've got names of things that make no sense to the business whatsoever, that's going to be harder later on. Changing them, you have to change them in a whole lot of places. Um, Leaving names that do not actually reflect the terms that the business uses mean that your reports or your data models are a lot harder to use. So a good example is, do you have customers, clients, accounts? What do you call the people that you service?
We call them customers.
Customers. Awesome. Great. Get that term right early on. And that's where your research can talk to what the industry standard is, but use what the business uses as those terms. So they're the main dimensions. Now, there is a couple of little trick dimensions in here. There's a couple of other things that we're grouping by that aren't necessarily as obvious as the ones we've already highlighted. So in the middle, we're looking at the revenue by stage. So the stage is actually something that we're grouping by. And we're also looking at the revenue by state. So these, again, are candidates for dimensions or attributes on dimensions. Warwick, when you say by state, do you talk about the state that the sale occurred or the state of the customer?
The state of the customer.
Awesome. That helps me with where to put state. Is it a separate dimension or is it just an attribute on a customer? That's great. Thanks for the clarification.
Now,
And
Kelly,
this part in the
I see that you've highlighted stage. Is that like, so you're meaning that's where I'm wanting to know about where it's going from? Hey, here's an opportunity to our pre-sales, to our sales, to our actual contract being put in place. That's what you're grouping this by, yes?
what I assume you're looking for.
Excellent, excellent.
So, and it's a funnel because it's a pipeline, which is a very common report element on pipelines is the funnel. How many people do we talk to? How many do we convert into, we're going to have a meeting? How many of those convert into, here's a quote, and how many convert to actual sales? The number's going to decrease as we work down the funnel. Obviously, the more tapered your funnel, the more wastage you have. You want it to be, a lot, the same, everything's the same size, and then you're not wasting effort higher up. That's where the funnel sort of comes through. So that's what we're looking for with that. Once again, having done the research on reporting on CRMs, that's the kind of thing that I know to ask for or know to present. Great. We now need to move on to the facts or the actions or the verbs. So Warwick is talking about that pipeline process. And facts are a process, something that happens within your organization. And within those facts, within that pipeline process, obviously it's going to need to have the information that links to all of these dimensions. But what we're primarily looking for on this report, if we go through and highlight the things that we're counting, is revenue. So we need to ensure that our fact has revenue. So I'm assuming this is the expected revenue that's going to come out of that particular opportunity, based on estimates and based on what you know from the start. And the value could change as you go through the particular stages. But what you're looking for here is how much money this particular opportunity could make your business. So we need to make sure that that revenue field is one of the attributes or one of the measures on our opportunity fact. So what else have we got here? You've got some percentages here, Warwick. Is that just a standard percentage of how many things are in the total of the pipeline?
Yeah. So as I get down, I want to be able to say, right, here's my percentage across the board for products. Here's the percentage for services, and then being able to break down that even further as to see what did it start at, at that opportunity to what we actually got to from an actual sales point of view.
Awesome. We've got revenue again. So we're just using the same measure each time. Now you've got over here forecast. Can you describe to me how you calculate forecast?
So the forecast is around. It includes both our opportunities and our sales. Okay, so I'm wanting to know once it first comes in and hits the opportunity hits the pipeline, right? Here's an estimate of what that's going to look like, right? And so I want to be able to see what that forecasting is and go, okay, I've got this opportunity and it's for 20% of our total budget for the year. So we really want to be able to move that from that opportunity through to the actual sale. So I need to be able to have those broken down.
So what I'm hearing is that forecast comes from a calculation of the revenue that you have within your pipeline. It's not a separate system that has budget amounts or forecast amounts.
No. We try and work that out so that we can, piece it all together.
So obviously I should be able to create a measure that is the forecast based on other information on the opportunity. If I did need to bring through forecasts or budgets from a different system, that would be a different fact table, would be a different process that would need to be able to relate to my opportunities based on things like accessories or, products. But in this particular example, I don't need to do that. But this is a really good way to flesh out what are those definitions? Do I need data from external or from other data sources? And I assume, Warwick, the traffic lights are just to sort of show whether you're above forecast or below forecast.
Yeah, so that it makes it nice and simple to really stand out for us. To
Cool.
do I need to dive in further?
That's awesome. I'm going to make sure the report doesn't just use coloured dots because people who are red green colorblind can't see that, but we can sort of talk to what those thresholds are and stuff as we develop. So this is how I sort of break down what my dimensions and facts are. Did you have a question?
I did. So before we step away, given that it is, I'll just go back to the previous slide before we actually move off of this slide. So we've got, so what if customer is in many states? Shouldn't the question be, can a customer have many accounts or each customer is a single account? Do you want to group by ship to or bill to location? These are very common business situations.
So there's sort of two parts to this particular question. You can have a ship to location and a bill to location that could absolutely exist within the customer. If that was the case, I would ask Warwick, this particular chart here, the revenue by state, do you want to see that by ship to or bill to location?
For me personally, right now, I want to do it by the ship to, okay, because we want to know, because various regions are going to have, or various states are going to have different trends. So we want to know, what does that look like? But the parent company could be in, California, and their ship to locations are crossing 4 of our regions. So being able to understand what that looks like, great question.
So you're adding something like a ship to location and a bill to location is very simple, and it's good to know at this particular point in the process. They are just attributes on your customer. When you start talking about whether a customer can have multiple accounts or multiple areas that they ship to, I go back to the question I asked previously about grain. And Warwick answered the question that we only care at the moment about the sort of the parent customer, the organization. So I'm going to assume that he only needs to know about that sort of parent organization and where their location is. If it did come out in this part of the discovery that he did want to know individual sub offices or individual people, then we would need to change the grain of the customer and have potentially a parent organization and sub or, branches, or maybe that information is at the branch level, not at the parent. We don't need to worry about the parent so much. We only need to know about the branches. So that question would actually be answered by going back and potentially adjusting the grain of that particular piece of information, that customer information. It's a great question to ask at this point in the process, because I'd rather have in my mind now that this is now about the branch than it is about the parent organization, and make sure that I factor that into my model moving forward. So great question to ask, and a perfect time to ask it. Awesome. Should we move on, Warwick? I'm conscious of time.
I think so, yes.
All right.
So I guess where we're coming from with this one is that, so like I'm not a technical person, right? I'm the manager, but my salespeople who are a little bit technical, like I mentioned at the start when Kelly said, "Oh, have you got anybody that knows both the business and the technical side of things?" And they said to me, "We've looked at this thing and we see that there's this part which is either a snowflake or a star schema. What does that actually mean? Is that a problem? Do we need to make the right decision about that? And do we need to make that decision now and understand what that's going to impact, with my sketch diagram that we've just been through?"
Awesome. So I'm going to describe the difference first, and then I'm going to let you decide whether you need a snowflake or a star schema. So for those that don't know, a snowflake schema is more like a enterprise data model, where we have third normal form and we break things out. So in this particular example, just to sort of introduce you to our basic schema, we have opportunities in the middle. There are fact, things like the calendar, the owners, the products, the dates. They come off as a standard points on a star. But over here on accounts, now whether we call it accounts or customers, this is just a basic mock-up. On those accounts, we have the idea of a territory, we have the idea of an industry, and we have the contacts that could sit on that particular account if we were going down to that lower level of grain, that lower level of detail. But here with the territories and the industries, these are actually snowflaked. They're not part of the account or the customer. They are further extensions beyond the main dimension, which is accounts. Now, it makes a lot of sense, especially if you come from a third normal form enterprise data model perspective. You wouldn't have industry on the accounts because there'd only be 4 or 5 industries. Same with territories. There's only 3 or 4 territories. Why would you list the territory name on each of the accounts? You'd have that out as a separate table, and you'd have a foreign key, primary key relationship between the two. Makes total sense if you're coming from an operational system design background. What it looks like in Power BI on the report, if I want to create a table or a chart or anything that shows my region, then my industry, and then my companies or my accounts, and the counts of the opportunities for those, I would need to go and I would need to find my industry. Now I can use the search, that does make life easy, but I'd need to find industry. Then I'd need to find territory and add that into the report. And then I'd need to find account name. And as you can see, these are all in 3 separate tables because that's what I built. That's what my picture looks like, my diagram looks like. That's a star schema. And when you are, inserting data into a database, makes it really, really fast, makes it great for that operational system. The star schema, on the other hand, which is more our dimensional modeling, would actually incorporate industry and territory. You can't see it in this particular diagram because I need to expand my customers. That would list them all within the same table. Now, we're not going to have a problem with the storage blowing up because the compression engines that analysis services and Power BI use compress them anyway. It doesn't actually have an impact on the storage of your data because of the way that these programs now compress data. Back in the Kimball book, they may have suggested more of a snowflake schema because you could save on space. Remember, space and storage used to be a lot more expensive. Nowadays, not expensive. Power BI compresses everything, makes it and no issue, nothing that you need to worry about. So I've added my industry and my territory into my customer. I might have the same value 1,000 times, don't care. system's going to compress it anyway. And what that actually means for my Power BI report, I've got the exact same breakdown on this particular table, but instead of having to search for everything in individual tables, I've just pulled a hierarchy because I can build a hierarchy because it's all in the one table. Can't build a hierarchy in Power BI on attributes that exist across tables. I can just drag and drop my industry hierarchy over to my visual on my rows, and it just works. It's in the right order. My users don't need to search for anything. They just need to find the industry hierarchy. So it makes it a lot more easy from a consumption point of view. It does require more ETL to actually, more data engineering to actually bring the data in that format. Does that answer your question, Warwick?
It does, and I think given with what you've shown here, and to make it easier, given my business people who are going to be doing this, I think this star schema is going to be the way to go, because it's going to really align with our business process and what they're trying to achieve and create this and moving forward.
Right. So do whatever your report builders just prefer. Like I said, there's pros and cons to both. Industry best practice, technically star schema, but more work involved in the data engineering. Do what the business wants, what they're going to consume better, and therefore find easier in the reports. Awesome. Alrighty. So whilst we've been discussing all of this, whilst we've been doing that, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've been taking some notes. We're now at the point where we can really draw up this model. So what I have, and I do take notes. I do actually do this. You don't need to see the details. It's exactly the same that's on the screen, but I really emphasize at this point, I take notes on paper or on my electronic tablet. I don't try and over-engineer this in something like Miro or Visio or things like that. I get lost in the products that I'm trying to use. I'd rather just draw things. I have an erase capability, so I can get rid of things if I need. That's why whiteboards are awesome, because you draw, you erase, you draw, you erase. But it sums up what we've been discussing. So an opportunity in the middle, that opportunity has products, it has dates. I've added these things, owners and campaigns, because they're CRM, normally available on CRMs, but they're not things that we have discussed here. And then we have this concept of customer or accounts. If we hadn't already clarified, we're using the word customers here, if I'm correct. We don't need to worry about contacts. I'm going to rub that bit off. And within those contacts, you said star schema. So industries, I put it here as a dot point whilst we were going, industries and territories, but you want to incorporate it into the customers. So on my note, I'd actually scribble out industries, I'd scribble out contacts. They're not things that we need now, but I want to make sure I actually draw my model so that I know what I'm building towards in the next part of the process. Couple of tips here. One model can have multiple fact tables. So if I did have the concept of budgets or forecast values, I could add that down the bottom as an additional fact table and draw lines to how that connects. So if that forecast amount from my report mockup was from a different system, it needed to connect through products. And probably also date, but definitely through products, because that's what the report showed me. So I'd make sure I had a line down to that. And my second tip is each business unit should have its own model. So we're not trying to put everything into one great big massive Uber cube or Uber model. We can actually split these things out separately. Warwick, are there any questions in the chat that would be good to address now?
No, we've got one that we'll be able to, I think will be good at the end once we've got through the data.
I'll push on. At this point, I'm just going to mention this briefly. I can, as part of the brainstorming process, I would then sort of list all the attributes that I need on each of the dimensions and the facts. There is another book. This one's great, the Agile Data Warehousing Design. Don't worry, the word agile I know is getting scarier and scarier. Ignore that bit. It talks a lot to this process of how do you actually come up with the attributes on each of the dimensions and the facts. I'm not going to go through it in too much detail now. You can always reach out to us on LinkedIn if you want me to sort of expand on that. But for now, in the interest of time, I'm going to push on. So as a result, this is my sort of picture. I brought industries in, so I really do need to update that. But what it actually allowed me to do was build a beautiful report. So Warwick, here's the report that I'll switch to the live version. Here's the report that you did a mock-up for. Do you reckon it looks close?
I think it does. So this is showing us everything, and I've got the ability to dive in and have a look at each of the regions.
Right, so we can actually break it down using Power BI's wonderful ability to interact with different visuals. So you can look at just the Midwest. Midwest's not doing quite as well with its physical products as some of the others. The others are a lot more green. But it seems to be the slightly more underperforming region. But in saying that, you can also look at your different services, or the industries of your customers. I don't know if there's a particular industry you were most interested in, but you can do that. You can change your date ranges as you see fit. And then it also shows you the different stages. So like I said before, this is quite you're converting 43% from that first sort of qualify phase through to close. In different regions, you're converting different numbers. But you're there you go. South has got the worst conversion. So they're probably they're converting. That's odd. They're converting the smallest amount. So that's probably the area you need to work on the most. Does that answer your questions?
It does. This is fantastic. This is going to really allow me to dive in and take advantage as to what we've got and really target the business appropriately.
Great. All right. So that was the process. So again, we started with a little bit of research, so I knew what questions to ask. Then I asked those questions of Warwick to identify the business process and dive deep and try to find out what he's actually trying to change with these reports. We talked about the grain of what we were trying to build. Then we looked for the dimensions. Then we looked for the facts. Then we drew the model. And from there, we were able to convert that over to a Power BI report. That Power BI report now scales really nicely with more and more data. It means drag and dropping elements onto the report is much easier, especially by building out that star schema instead of the snowflake schema. It also made writing DAX for all of those measures on that report really simple. None of these measures were particularly complicated because of the way that we brought the data in and we structured the data model. So that is the process that we generally use. Warwick, is there any questions that you want me to address specifically? We are kind of at time. So if there's something we don't get to, we can reach out on LinkedIn.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. We do have a little bit of time. So Kelly, so one question from your experience, what is better to do for the fact table? To add a header plus item info into a single fact table, or split it between op details and opportunity details and opportunity items, i.e. header info as a dimension and items info as a fact? I've seen both, can't decide which one is better, or just go with a simple solution.
Are your reports going to be self-service by business users, or are your reports going to be completely developed by technical people who understand dimensional modeling? That is the question I pose when I'm asked that. And the response to that changes my response. So if you are building a very self-service model, so anyone in your business can open up Power BI desktop or Power BI in the web and can drag and drop things from the sidebar and bring it in, or they can use the personalize my visuals, I would flatten it. and keep it as simple as possible. Keep it as a single fact table. A fact table represents a process. Your process is your sale. It has header information and it has footer information, but it's that star scheme. It's making it a star schema, less a snowflake schema. I know technically those terms refer to dimensions, but I try and associate them with facts as well. Then your users can't misinterpret. So you're going to have columns that are your total sale for that header, and that's going to be the same value for multiple lines. You know not to sum on that, and you can make it so that you can't do sums based on the attributes in Power BI. And then the items within that you can sum up, and they should total the total that you've got in the other column. I'd get rid of the other column, to be honest. But you can make that model so users can't misinterpret it. It's a lot more data engineering. It's a lot more work up front, but then those business users can't get it wrong. If the only people writing reports and the only people personalizing personalizing the visuals is people that understand this, you can keep them separate because they should be able to understand those concepts and they know not to sum things that you're actually summing at 4 times. They know not to do averages over the same column multiple times. Lots less work in the data engineering, having the 2 tables, but much harder to consume down the line. Does that help?
So yes, makes sense. So
Awesome.
I guess the easiest part to, from my point of view, is that old adage of using KISS, keep it simple, stupid, based on who's actually going to be understanding it, who's going to be creating the reports, and how that fits with their process, right? Because as you said, if we can make it fit to, hey, I'm a business person and this is the process I know and use, and these are the attributes that I've got access to, that's going to be a whole lot better and easier for me in that star schema than in a snowflake and having to try and understand how to pull it all together and generate those reports. So Kelly, a big thank you to us and on how we've done. Look, we're glad that you've liked this. Okay, so when we put this session together, we decided that we'd try and do it a little differently than a standard presentation in doing it in this fashion. And so that's fantastic feedback for us that you are liking how we've gone about doing this introduction to data modeling for you. So if you do have any other questions that we haven't been able to get to during this session, as I put in the chat to Tony, reach out to Kelly and I. We've got our LinkedIn details up here. David has put them in the chat. Reach out to us and we're happy to ask questions and help you out.